Hello, rockers. Joe Kane here from JoeRocksCoronado, and today I'm going to be showing you. I'm just going to be finishing up this mandala stone that I've been working on. It's part of a series, a new series of rocks that I'm painting using gold and bronze, copper, these kind of warm metallic colors. And in this case, I'm only going to be using a base coat of copper, metallic copper. And I think I picked this up at Michael's or at the Hobby Lobby. I'm not sure which one. And then also some puffy paints. I've got a bunch of colors I'll show you in a minute to show you what I'm using. And I've got a lot of the work already done on this rock, but I think you'll be able to see kind of what my process is, and I'll talk about it as I go. So if you have any questions, I appreciate you just leaving them in the comments, and I'll try to answer you as quickly as I can. I know there's a lot of people out there that are learning as I am about rock painting, and I think it's a lot of fun for me to share some of the things that I've learned over the last 700 or so rocks that I've painted. And I look forward to interacting with you and sharing this love of rock painting. So here we go. So here's the one I have so far in this series. It's basically a gold base color, and I've used a couple of different gold puffy paints for the design. Pretty basic design. And yeah, so that's kind of the series I'm working in. Here's one of the paints here, and I have some others. This is the base coat of royal gold, and then I don't know, this one was pretty easy. I just used two different colors of gold on it. So the other one I'm doing that you'll see in a minute is a little bit more complicated, but this is kind of get you an idea of the series that I'm working in. So I'm kind of going with this style. The rock that I'm working with, it's still, I've done some work on it. It's got some wet paint, so I'm being really careful. But this is the back of it, and you can kind of see the type of rock I'm working with. I found this at the beach, and it's a bigger rock, and it is kind of rough and porous. So I did put on a pretty thick coat of the copper paint to get started as a base coat. And so, you know, when you're working with porous rocks, it's important to keep kind of make it smooth before you get started. So in this case, when I'm using puffy paint as the main material on the front, it's not going to matter as much as if I was trying to paint on it. It doesn't have to be super smooth, but this is what I got so far. As you can see, I've got a sort of limited color palette. I've got golds and some copper and a couple of blue and some turquoise in there, and that's what I'm doing. So there's the gold and the light gold. Also used the copper. That's puffy paint from Scribblers. And the glitter gold. And then this was one of the blues I used for some of the highlights around here. And then also I used some deep turquoise puffy paint. And lastly, the dark blue, which you can see kind of making the outside edges there. So what I want to do now is I want to finish this up with a border of black and white. I've been looking at a lot of mosaics from the Roman era, so I want to kind of frame this in. All right. So I'm going to use black and white dots to make sort of a framing edge. Important to always shake your paints. Make sure they're well mixed, and I tap it on the desk like that to get the paint down into the nozzle. Okay. Another thing, just real quick, when I'm working on a rock like this, I don't want to touch the edges too much, so I just use an old envelope, and that allows me to grab hold of the envelope when I'm turning it, or a piece of cardboard like this would work. So place it on there, and that way if I start to get paint close to the edge and I don't want to touch it, then it's easy for me to maneuver it and keep it neat without smudging my paints or ruining my work. So, all right, so let's get started. I'm going to start with the white. You can start with either color. And I'm just going to go around the edge of the work that I've done so far. And part of the process here is to just get familiar with your paints. When it's colder, these puffy paints tend to be very firm and thick, and when it gets warmer, they tend to be a little more liquidy and a little more runny, I guess you would call it. So the amount of paint you use and how quickly they're going to come out of the applicator it can change with the temperature. So I often will test them out ahead of time and just make sure I understand where I'm at with my paints. I can tell you that earlier on while painting this, one of my gold colors that I hadn't used much for a while, it was coming out real slow and it had kind of a clog in the nozzle, and so about 3 or 4 dots in, it suddenly released and a whole bunch of gold came out, and I had to deal with that. I had to scrape some of that off and kind of reset it and make sure to clear it up. So done with the white. I usually tap it down just so the excess paint comes out of the nozzle so it doesn't get dried up and clog the nozzle for later. And here I'm prepping the black, so I'm ready to go. So I'm just going to fill in the gaps right now between the white dots. I always try to be very careful. I often would form the tip of paint, the little drop of paint on the end of the nozzle as I'm going before I apply it to the rock. Every once in a while you'll get an air bubble in the paint, and as it comes out it'll just kind of spray a little bit onto it's just not a good situation. So if you can actually very gently squeeze that applicator and you can see the bubble forming, then you're probably pretty safe, although you got to be careful depending on what size of dot you want. You don't want to squeeze out too much and then end up with a big blotch where you just wanted a small dot. So I just be careful, and a lot of times I'll tap it like that just to get it down to the end of the nozzle, make sure there's no air bubbles in there, because it is a pain in the butt to try to correct it once you get a mistake on your work, especially when you're this far in. So getting to the end here, being very careful. And now I have a nice little frame. This idea was from some Roman mosaics that I was looking at online, so I think it looks pretty good. Nothing major here that I need to correct, I don't think. And I might add in some detail in the middle there. And then eventually I'll seal it, but for now I think that looks pretty good. So yep, I like it. So that's how you do it. And I probably should have started it recording from the beginning, but oh well, maybe next time. All right, thanks for watching, and tune in again for my next one.